Okay, the clock says 7 p.m. We're going to call this meeting to order. First of all, by acknowledging that we are on Treaty 1 land and the homeland of the Métis people. Next, for introductions, if we could begin on my far left.
Switched it up, did you? Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Bartmanovich.
Steve Axworthy.
Raymond Morrow, CAO.
I'm Graham Randall, and Deputy Reeve sitting in tonight for Penny Reeve, who's on a well-earned vacation.
Erwin Kump is my name.
Okay, moving on to the adoption of the agenda. I have a resolution that would add the GFL quote for the lidded recycling container, and also would delete the Stantec engineering proposal as it pertains to the generators. Could I have movers and seconders, please?
Keep it.
Any discussion on this resolution? All those in favor? Carried. My son as well. Thank you, Raymond. Next item is the minutes from our December 3rd meeting. All councillors have copies of the minutes. Be it resolved that the minutes of the December 3rd regular council meeting be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Kumka, seconded by Steve. Yeah, Councillor Axworthy, also known as Councillor Axworthy. Discussion on this? It's pretty straightforward. The vote. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Next item is delegations. We have no delegations registered for this evening. That's correct, Raymond? Following that, we'll move on to committee reports. There's a large group of them, as usual. And we'll start with Public Works. Mike, please.
Thanks, Graham. I'll just hit the highlights. That is that there's some brushing work that's begun at the Y, and I didn't know what the Y was. And someone told me that it's that area south of David Road. So they've started brushing there. The roads have been sanded as required, and as some of you will have noticed, have started to be bladed just today. And good news, they've started flooding the skating rink. So I'm looking forward to a couple games of shinny this winter, if my knees can hold up. The new half-ton that we had ordered had arrived, and this half-ton is to replace at least one of our existing vehicles that are sadly at end of life. The bubblegum and Band-Aids just will not work on them anymore. So good that they have two reliable vehicles now to use for work. Also, a snow bucket was purchased for the backhoe, and I believe the resolution to expend the funds was made last meeting. And finally, as always, a reminder to everyone here that potable water is available at the Victoria Beach Fire Hall and at the Albert Beach Pump House, and water is tested monthly throughout the winter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next is Finance. Erwin, please.
It is indeed a pleasure to be able to present a financial report that continues to show improvements in our position. And again, I must commend administration and all of our employees for working hard to provide services, and things are coming along nicely. You have a copy of my report. Just the graph that is part of the report shows balance sheet accounts as of the end of November. Our reserves dropped in November by just under $100,000, and that was primarily because we were using some of our reserves to buy some equipment. Secondly, our accounts receivable at the end of November stood at $601,000, and that's down from last year's limit at $824,000. So again, admin is doing a good job collecting our receivables. As a result of collecting receivables, our cash is up by $261,000. Can I say that again? Our cash is up by
As many times as you like.
$261,000, leaving us with a balance of $366,000 in our account. Our operating surplus stands at $185,000 this year, compared with $115,000 at this time last year. Again, thanks to administration and Public Works and all of our staff for their hard work. If you combine our cash reserves, our long-term reserves, and our receivables, were actually $61,000 lower than this time last year. But when you take into account the equipment that we have purchased, that drop is rather insignificant. We've probably spent, and I'll give you a harder number next month, probably $500,000 on new equipment. Is that fairly close? Maybe not quite that much. Yeah, that's high. It's probably $300,000 for sure. I'll give you a hard number. Anyways, for us to drop by $61,000, given the fact that the equipment that was purchased, it's still very good. So again, it's very nice. I'm the messenger. I can't take any responsibility for generating these numbers. I just get to report, and I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herman.
I just would point one thing out, though. It was your idea to, and it's the way it should be, which is that we're starting to collect our data. So year over year, we can take a look as to where we are versus previous. So yeah, that's.
All right, let's move on to Protective Services. Councillor Axworthy, also known as Steve. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that's right. We shuffled the deck. Okay, Mike, please.
And I have to apologize, I'm still in transition. The best I can say is that the number of call-outs are down significantly from last year. And I was speaking with Stuart about this, and he owes a large part of that to the resurgence of the citizens on patrol, and also with 2 police vehicles now, the heightened visibility of the police presence in Victoria Beach, for really helping to see a real reduction in all types of call-outs like break-ins and the such. So I'm hoping to have firmer numbers next month, as I will be attending my first police board meeting.
Thank you, Mike.
I got fire now.
Yeah, let's do fire. Go right ahead.
Yep. So there were 6 calls in November. 4 of the calls were in the RM of Alexander. 2 were medical related. 1 was a fire alarm, and another was a motor vehicle rollover. There were no major injuries in any of these calls. We did have 2 calls in Victoria Beach. One was a fire alarm. The second call was to a structure fire caused by a malfunctioning wood stove chimney. So please clean your chimneys. You don't want that creosote buildup. The fire department did an amazing job in saving the structure. It can be repaired, and no one was hurt. Our recruitment drive has worked well, and we have a group of people that are interested in working towards joining the fire department. And I would highly recommend that for anybody, because it's very rewarding and they do incredible work. We continued our regular training, preparing our responders for the winter cold weather, and it's a constant upkeep to try to keep the gear warm and in working order. Just real quick on the police, I do know that new body armor was purchased this year. There were 2 more two more additionally padded pieces of body armor that were also purchased, as well as some equipment that was sorely needed. So, yes.
Thank you, Steve. And it sounds like the transition from you to Mike is going smoothly. Very good. For special events, I don't think we have a report on that topic for this particular meeting. And we, Michael, correct me if I'm mistaken, but we probably don't have much to say about the golf course.
Not this month. Tea times are wide open, but we wanted to go over it.
Well, there's your update. Next is municipal buildings, which brings us to me. Our fire chief and our building inspector and I have been meeting and working with a number of issues associated with the Moonlight Inn, and they are ongoing, and they will be reported as and when they develop. Further on, the thought is being given to the longer-term deposition of the Moonlight Inn building, as well as current issues. There's various quotes in progress. I've met with some prospective contractors on various building and accessibility requirements that have been outlined to us. So I'm endeavoring to get prices or budget prices on as many of these items as I can to bring forward to our 2020 budget deliberations, which is scheduled to begin January 13th in Winnipeg. That includes the VB store and bakery. There's ramps to consider, handicap doors to consider, and I say to consider. We have to look at them and assign priorities. There's no way that we could deal with every item on every list in 1 year, but we're making progress on prioritizing them so we could budget accordingly. That also includes a whole whack of renovations to the golf course clubhouse that has been reported on previously. We're still looking at or considering possible options where the former building inspector office is located near the gate, and the doctor's cottage roofing remains a possibility. We've taken a hard look, I did, along with Rod, Accessibility Committee. We were looking at a ramp for the gate office, and after careful measurement and analysis and meeting with a contractor, it just won't fit. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to do it, so we'll probably be carrying on with a doorbell system for another year unless we can come up with some other alternative. Very often with municipal buildings, we have to look at what we can do and what we can't do, what's doable, what's achievable, and not beat our head against the wall with things that can't be done. I personally have discontinued soliciting quotes for trailers or whatever for temporary seasonal constable accommodation, because it's been proposed there are other better, more economical alternatives that we're taking a look at, including cottage rental. Furthermore, I've been discussing with Raymond the particulars of the quoting procedure on certain municipal jobs, municipal building jobs, where you might have one or more buildings with a dozen little piddly items to be done, and it would take more time to enumerate it than it would to do the work. So we may in fact engage a reliable contractor to work on an hourly basis to a restricted list, but we'll be working that through together and with Raymond and through the budgetary consultations. The whole municipal buildings portfolio is going to have a pretty sizable effect on our budgetary consultations, but we'll work through that together, assigning priorities where we can. And that's me for municipal buildings. Thank you very much, Graham. Now, while you've got me and you're stuck with me...
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Have you cataloged the accessibility projects, identified which items need attention?
Yes, we've identified 12 items or priorities, and Mike and I have been meeting with them because some of this overlaps onto Public Works, whereas a lot of it remains municipal buildings. But there is a budgetary line item, as you know, for accessibility. Some of it can slip over to other portfolios, but that's just a shell game. We still have to look at the total dollars. Yes, we have been working with Rod Bowman towards what we think is reasonably doable, achievable this year, and I have a figure to bring forward to Council for budgetary discussions. And
Just a tiny bit of background. There's new legislation that was enacted which requires the municipality to make sure that all of our buildings have a level of accessibility for people who have mobility issues and disabilities. So over time, we're going to have to upgrade all of our access points so that we're in compliance.
yes, and
We have some time in
Yep.
order to get that done.
the municipal accessibility plan, which was carved out with the committee's cooperation, it needed to be presented to the province before the end of December, and that's been done. So we already have, we're up to date on the legislation, the documentation. Now it's the performance, and like any other municipality, we're not likely to get up to 100% on every item in any one year, but you have to have a plan. You got to start somewhere, and that's what we're determined to do this year with council's support. Well, you've got me on the hot seat. Let me do my little building inspector report. Thank you very much to Curtis for his report. Short, sweet, I love it. He even puts them in large print, makes it easier for us to read. Permits issued, 2. But the value of the permit, $650,000. And the permit fees collected, this is where Curtis helps pay for himself, $2,444. Thank you for that, Curtis, and thank you for the report. With committee reports, the next is the doctor, or the medical report.
No report.
Short but sweet. What have we got to say about communications?
I'll communicate it to you. We've been in touch with AllNet. A project manager has been appointed for the project for the refresh of the RM's website, and I'm just waiting on some a tentative project initiation date and some planning information to get this to get that project going.
Anything to add to that, Steve? All right. As far as the gate, which would normally be Penny, there's nothing to report there that I'm aware of for the purposes of this meeting. As far as accessibility, that would be Penny and/or Irwin. Irwin, anything to say?
No. Rod Bowman had recently provided us with some draft copy, which is going to be reviewed in terms of the next step.
Yes.
There's an additional standard that we have to accept.
Okay, and he'll be sharing that with us soon?
We'll be reporting to you on that come the new year.
Well, that's good. Thank you very much. And the municipal buildings report that you picked up on, thank you, that dealt with a few accessibility issues as well. So there we go there.
Can we get a list of the items that you have identified so I can share that with the accessibility committee?
The answer to your question is yes.
Thank you.
I'll work on it. I may even consult further with Rod rather than use my own discretion in boiling it down. I'll pretty much need that in presenting a figure for accessibility to budget anyway.
I think it's important for the public to know that, Council and the Accessibility Committee are addressing these concerns and trying to quantify what it would cost to make the changes, and as best we can within our financial constraints, we'll see what can happen in the new year.
Certainly a reasonable request. Thank you, Aaron. All right, moving on to heritage.
Heritage, there were two items. The first was that we were going to be looking at trying to get a proper list as to when the original families arrived here, because we do have a plaque. It's just not correct. And there's an interesting story behind it, but the idea right now would be to not amend it because it's iron, but to essentially make a new one. But for heritage, it's proven to be not more trouble than it's worth. It's worth a lot, but it has been very difficult to go out and get all the photos and information that we need. So going back to the communications on the website, one of the things that I've asked for is to have a heritage page, not just that would tell our stories, but also allow people to submit photos, submit their stories, and also submit to say that I have an artifact that you may want to look at. So in that way, everything could just be put onto one spot, and then we can say yes or no and move forward from there. So it'd be substantially easier for us to move forward in terms of gathering all that information, because as it is right now, we're just kind of going here, grabbing what we can, scanning it, and then I kind of have to make the determination as to whether or not we can afford a proper scan. So that it would help a lot.
All right, have you got something specific you could bring to our next get-together with AllNet as far as our redesign of our website?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. No, I've already been in contact with them. And then that's all. Yep. We're good.
Thank you very much. How about trails?
There we go. Had to wait.
You saved the best for the last.
Yeah, there we go. So much fun. I love trails. But no, for the website specifically for the trails is that we'd be looking at having a registration of volunteers. So then that way we can get all the volunteers listed, and we could have an official list. But then at the same time to have a proper report on the trails conditions. So that's essentially where, again, going back to the communication and the new website design, that would be something that would be integrated into the website itself. Other than that, there's been one of the major issues that came up last year was the cross-country ski trails versus the snowmobiles trails. That issue has largely been taken care of now. There's still a couple of things that need to get dealt with, but we shouldn't be facing any more major issues with cross-country skiers or snowmobilers. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Steve. The resolution states, be it resolved that the December committee reports be accepted as presented. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. As for discussion, I thank each of you for your comments throughout the presentation. Anything else you'd like to add pertaining to the committee reports? All right, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Carried. Next on the agenda, of course, is accounts and finances. And the resolution stands that the following list of accounts be approved for payment. Account payable checks in the amount of $121,654.66, and December 13th payroll in the amount of $25,892.49. If I could have a mover and a seconder on this motion, please, or this resolution. equal opportunity. It's a long list. Any discussion, please?
Just a couple of items I'd like to highlight. We're spending $11,400 on some new computers. Bill Gates was running short of cash, so he needed to figure out a way to increase his revenue. So the old Windows 7 is no longer going to be supported, so we have to upgrade our computers. Secondly, $22,000 was spent on a new rotary rough mower for the lawn for the golf course. And Public Works, as was mentioned earlier, needed a new pickup truck to replace the old one, which was essentially no longer functional, and $38,000 was spent on that. So it's nice to see that we're upgrading some of our old equipment, which was becoming very expensive to maintain. And it's nice to have the cash wherewithal to do so.
Any further discussion on the resolution? And I thank Erwin for his continued vigilance and oversight of the accounts.
Easy job.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Carried. We have nothing scheduled for business arising from previous meeting.
Actually, I just have one thing.
Unless Steve has.
Yeah, only because I noticed that there are about 23 or 30 views to the last video, but we typically get more when we have these meetings out at the lake. Just to remind everybody that our Lake Winnipeg resolution to have the city, or have the AMM pressure the city to reverse their decision to not use ferric chloride in their water treatment facility on the North End plant passed 450 to 23. That gives a lot of strength to trying to clean up the lake. Since our last meeting, the province has denied the city an extension to their request to have more time to try to solve the problem, which would have extended it to, I believe, is 26 years, if I remember off the top of my head. So now they have basically said that the city has to form a new committee to deal with it immediately, which is really good news for us because it means that we're going to have start seeing a reduction, hopefully fairly soon, in the amount of raw sewage being dumped into the lake. So I just wanted to bring that up.
That's good. Thank you very much, Steve. And to the rest of us, for other councillors, you realize, of course, that in putting the agenda together, Raymond relies on each of us to make contributions as far as business arising from previous meeting, if it's relevant. So I'd just like to suggest that particular line item in our agenda might be somewhat underused, but it's up to you people to decide going forward. Thank you very much.
I think we owe a great deal of thanks to Steve for pushing hard on that, and to have a small municipality get a motion passed at AMM is significant, and to have it passed so with such a large majority speaks volumes. Thank you.
Congratulations, Steve. You did good work. Thank you from all of us. Moving on to other business. We have 1602, a procedural bylaw, which is up for first reading. Be it resolved that bylaw 1602, regulating the proceedings and conduct of council, be given a first reading. If I could ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Axworthy and seconded by Councillor Bartmanovich. Signatures look similar. No wonder, no wonder Penny asked you to pencil in your initials. My goodness. All right. This being the first reading of a bylaw, is there any discussion since councillors have had a chance to look through it?
Raymond, can you give us a brief synopsis of the changes?
There's only two significant changes. One, I didn't write it down, so I have to go through it. Clause 7.3, question period is being removed from the agenda. And 8.5, the curfew for meetings is being changed from 10 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. with a possible half-hour extension beyond that. So that would mean two and a half hour meeting, depending on the location in Winnipeg. That'd be a 3-hour meeting with a possible half-hour extension.
Thank you, Raymond. Any further discussion pertaining to this resolution? Mike?
Yeah, I just want to clarify real quick that we are removing, at least we're looking at removing question period, but the idea would be to replace it with several open houses throughout the year, so then that way we can still have exactly, the exchange back and forth between the community members and ourselves. At this point, what we're asking is that we receive the emails, we can look over them, and we can respond diligently. It's just, as it is right now, sometimes we go on for an extra 30, 40 minutes with question period, and it'd be a little bit more efficient if we can address them all at once, get them into our planning scheme, and then move forward with all the suggestions and everything that we get. And throughout the year, the emails that we get, we can respond to them, and we can start amending our planning scheme to fit.
All right, with the first reading of this, it will understandably go onto our website in due course, and we may or may not get some feedback from residents before it comes up to second and third, so there's room for more discussion should that be necessary. Having been moved and seconded, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The next item is the 2020 interim budget as a resolution. The interim budget is a tradition whereby before the new year begins, some numbers are set out as far as next year's budgetary considerations. It sets out the parameters for budgetary discussions. Nothing's carved in stone at this point. This simply sets out a dollar value to work towards. It allocates monies according to various departments as a matter of practice and tradition. It adds up to $910,000 for next year, but that's subject to an awful lot of work. The budgetary consultations begin in Winnipeg, and they're usually quite arduous because each of us has our own axis to grind and listening to residents. So this is where the resolution is set out at the present time. If I'd asked for a mover and seconders on this. Moved by Councillor Bartmanovich, seconded by Councillor Axworthy.
No, I'm good.
Kumka, I'm sorry, I passed it the other way.
IK.
Oh, that IK. Okay. I thought you were putting in a dollar amount or something. It's been moved and seconded, notwithstanding my confusion. So we'll call for a vote. All those, but first, let me call for discussion.
Essentially what it is, it's an interim spending authority until such time as our 2020 budget can be finalized. So we need authority to, pay payroll and the ongoing expenses between now, between Jan 1 and the time when the formal budget is approved.
Thank you, Erwin, for pointing that out better than I was able to myself. That's why you get a whole table over there. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. There's a resolution to be dealt with pertaining to the development agreement between 5699262 Manitoba and the municipality, and this is the agreement with the Poiriers on the Albert Beach development. Before we get to discussion, we'll call for, I'll ask for a mover and seconder for a motion that would allow our Deputy Reeve and CAO be authorized to sign the agreement. Okay, you got it. He wants it.
I want to go watch the hockey game.
Yeah, okay. Talk faster. I got it. Moved by Erwin Kumka, seconded by Councillor Axworthy. Any discussion on this?
Raymond, has the agreement been signed off by Mitch? And
No, it will be once we submit it to them, because they've reviewed it.
he was concerned about some deadlines with hydro.
Yeah, actually tomorrow.
Yeah.
However, this agreement has been in the work in progress for months. It's not been thrust upon the RM as of today.
Yep. All right. It's been moved, seconded. Brief discussion. It's Steve?
Yeah, my issue is just simply that I don't support the development. I have no issue with the agreement. I think it's very well done, but my issue from the beginning was just simply that I don't support the development itself. So I just wanted to get that out there.
So noted. Thank you. Having been moved and seconded, unless there's further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of accepting this? And those opposed? So noted. That's carried. Thank you. The next is a resolution that the RM of Victoria Beach Council accept the quote dated December 13th, 2019 from Stantec Engineering regarding the design and upgrade of the Dyke Road at Albert Beach. Total cost of said services to be $8,500, excluding GST. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Got to read the fine print. Good for you. Moved by Councillor Komka, seconded by Councillor Bartmanovich. Discussion, please. What's that?
was saying you didn't have a problem with my name. Or sorry, it's all good. It's a bad joke.
Just for clarification, this study, the engineering study, will examine the costs and the design of improving the dike on the municipal road that runs immediately west of the Poirier development. And that once completed, that will further augment the flood protection for Albert Beach.
Yes, that's correct. And it might also be mentioned that Stantec had made a proposal in November in the amount of $11,000, and between Stantec and Raymond, and thank him for his good work, they managed to massage that down to a more manageable $8,500. So we're not just taking what we're quoted and accepting it. There's other Stantecs that are outstanding that we're not going to deal with tonight that are in the process of being massaged into more palatable size and shape dollar-wise. It's been moved, seconded, and unless there's any further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Sign it now, Raymond, or later? It authorizes you? Okay, that's good. Excellent. We have a resolution that the RM of Victoria Beach Council accept the quote, contract number 26790, for a 36-month term from GFL regarding the provision of one lidded 60-ton recycling container at a cost of $100 per month. If I could have a mover and a seconder on this, please. Moved by Councillor Ashworthy, seconded by Councillor Bartmanovich. For discussion, I think, Raymond, if you could add a few words to this by way of explanation.
Actually, the 60-ton container is the one that's commingled, and we feel it's necessary to have a lidded bin because when you get major snowfall, it's going to be mostly full of snow, and then they transport these bins into Winnipeg, and it's like $300 and some odd for transportation. So it doesn't make very much economic sense to be hauling a bin that's mostly full of snow, and that's the idea behind getting a lidded bin. So it's a nominal, really a nominal amount. $100 per month is not a major amount.
So that'll have those entrance portals on the side, or will you flip up on top?
I'm not sure on the design.
It's a good idea to keep the rain and the vermin and the snow out.
Council was copied and followed the correspondence between Raymond and GFL. So this is a good deal and a common sense solution. Any further discussion?
I just do have one issue in that the marketplace investigation really bothered me with our with respect to recycling and what has been going on with recycling. A lot of burning, a lot of just strictly putting the recycling into the dump. So I suppose my question is that if we do find out that some of our recycling is just simply going off and being burned or being thrown into the dump and not being recycled or stored until such time as the market opens up again, is there any way that we can pull out of the contract and find another company who may not be doing such practice? I don't know if GFL is. I'm not accusing them. I want to be clear of that. I'm just simply saying that if we were to find out later on that that practice was being done, could we then say that they're not fulfilling their end of the bargain?
This correspondence indicates that Raymond has discussed some of the provisions of opting out or canceling the contract. They are in place. It remains to be seen whether we want to investigate or challenge our disposal partners or any other prospective partners as to where it goes from there. I don't know if that's within our scope, but it's something that, Steve, you might choose to bring forward at some future date, but it has to do with, it gets pretty close to questioning the integrity of our supplier, and I don't know if we'd want to go there.
It's not a matter of questioning, it's a matter of that if we were to find out afterwards. Of course, we're entering into this contract and this agreement by saying that, we believe that you are a reputable company. But if we were to find out later, that's what I'm asking. And Raymond would be the one to ask.
I think one thing you got to point out is GFL is not the recycler. GFL is strictly hauling the material. It's Cascades as the recycling company. And there's very few companies that actually are doing recycling now, so we don't have a lot of options. And if we don't recycle, we don't get the grants from the province of Manitoba. So if it ends up in the landfill, we get nothing for it. So if it's going to end up in a landfill anyway, we may as well get monies from the province of Manitoba for at least doing our part.
But thank you for bringing that up, Steve.
It's common knowledge that the whole area of recycling is in disarray. The fact that our relationship with China is deteriorating, and they were the major purchaser of these items. Hopefully, over the next few years, that situation will be resolved, and we can get back onto a reasonable track. But I think your point is very well made, Stephen. We want to be stewards of and responsible for the garbage we create, and minimize the impact as best we can.
Thank you. Having been moved and seconded, I'll now call for a vote on this. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. As mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the next item on our printed agenda, Stantec Engineering proposal for the generators, has been removed from this particular meeting because Raymond continues to work with Stantec to scale down the scope of their participation to something that's as affordable as possible. We may very well have something ready to bring to the next council meeting. All right, thank you. Following our agenda, the next item is correspondence. Are there any items of correspondence that councillors wish to bring up or speak to? I'll mention two of them just briefly. Request for funding support, one from the social scene, and the other one from the Summer Winds people, just to acknowledge their request, and these will be dealt with in the context of upcoming budgetary consultations.
There was actually just one quick thing that I did throw in here, which is just to remind all artists. It was sent out a little while ago. There was a call for from the Boreal Shores Art Tour to remind all artists that they will be doing it again this year. So it was a great success year over year. They make more and more money, and it's fun to have. So sign up.
Thank you for pointing that out, Steve. And here again, I think it's in view of what's being contemplated on question period, I think it puts that much more onus on councillors to bring items of correspondence up at the meeting where necessary or appropriate. All correspondence is acknowledged and responded to. It's just a question of which components of it fit within the context of a particular council meeting. Which brings us to the sometimes exciting and often challenging question period.
Okay, Stuart Hughes, 426 8th Avenue, and I guess my question has to do with the abolition of question period. It's been stated that there may be open houses in which people can get together and actually make their concerns known. These may not happen very often. I believe that accountability and transparency actually work if you have a question period. People can raise an issue immediately, and it can be dealt with. In other words, at the last meeting down here, I raised the question about work that had been done at the gravel pit, taking gravel out, expanding it westward, making it unsafe for people. You might not know about this. So I think a question period is extremely useful. Okay, it's transparency. You should not fear it. And we're not trying to run a 4-minute mile. In other words, if you have listen, that's 15 minutes or so of questions, it's not the end of the world. Your response.
So basically, your question is,
Why?
Why get rid of question period?
That's right. What is the problem with it?
Yep. Amongst ourselves, we've discussed, and present company excluded, the extent to which question period has been misused and abused. It's turned into a bit of a rant for people. We have to, trying to police it, enforce it, becomes uncomfortable and unpleasant for everybody. So often it's coming down to yada, 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 but what's the question? Please, what's the question? The point you've made is valid. We're very sincere in using correspondence, business from previous meetings, town halls, and our continued very liberal policies on delegations. We think more than offsets the time-wasting rants that we're all exposed to, that are sometimes the character of question period. But your point has been made. We've passed first reading. It goes on the website. There's more discussion and consideration to go into this, but hopefully we've explained why we think this would be best for all concerned and how we intend to offset and make up for it. So thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to speak to Steve's point?
Sure.
Mike?
No, just Stuart.
Stuart, sorry.
As Graham so eloquently put it, I won't put it as eloquently. We don't want to get rid of residents asking questions of council, but most often a lot of these questions come with a lot of emotion. And this isn't the forum for dealing with emotion. It's a forum for dealing with questions. Questions, if we decide to go the town hall route, questions can still be sent to council with a request that the question be read out during the meeting and responded to. We will continue to do that. Again, one of the key premises of this is that we give you no valid information if you catch us flat-footed with an emotion-charged question. We typically can't offer you a good answer, and what we want to do is we want to give you the information that you need. That requires forethought, and that requires the opportunity to look at your question, to research the question, and to deliver a concise answer to you and to everybody else who's probably asking that same question. So this isn't a stifle. We're not trying to keep anybody quiet. We want the questions to keep coming. But again, give us an opportunity to do the research that we need to do to give you the answer that you deserve.
We're certainly not going to stifle questions, but we're going to ask that they be presented in a civil and appropriate way to do two things: eliminate the political opinions offered by the questioner, as we've had to do on many occasions. Penny has had to ask the questionnaire, what is your question? We would like those questions to be submitted. We will then be given, council will be given an opportunity to review the matter and provide a reasoned response. The questioner will be given the choice. Do they wish to have the question read out, and do they wish to be identified as the questioner? If they choose not to, questions can be put forward in an anonymous way. So again, we just want to introduce some civility to the process, because it has, and I think you would agree, on many occasions turned into a bit of a bit of grandstanding, and I don't think the process was helped in terms of clarifying things. It turned into a bit of a, as Mike referred to it, as a rant, and we just want to introduce some civility into the process.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but are you, just for clarification, and that's why a question period is pretty good, because you can clarify a remark, that I've heard two things. One is that questions will be accepted at open houses, but according to what I've just heard from you, Erwin, is that you will have to respond to any question sent in advance to a council meeting. Is that what you said? Correct.
Yes.
Okay, because the other thing was sort of this idea of an open house rather than that.
If you look at the bylaw that's being presented, section 11.0 and 11.1 clarifies.
Okay. Well, the other thing, too, is I've also looked at the Municipal Act in terms of how to conduct meetings and so on. And one of the things that the government in Manitoba has put out is that you should be able to list yourself as a delegation up to 2 hours before a meeting if you see something on the agenda that you wish to discuss. This is in the Manitoba handbook.
If you're a delegation, Stuart, you're coming to inform.
Right. I understand
not to question,
right.
not to debate.
I understand that, exactly. But I'm just saying, okay, that my reading of that document was, right now we can be a delegation, right? You just have to send it in a certain period in advance. But the government apparently states it's up to 2 hours. We have to contact the CAO and get permission to be a delegation.
Could we allow Raymond to respond to one of your points, please?
The Municipal Act does not legislate how the municipality, individual councils run their meetings. That's strictly up to the council by way of a bylaw, which is what council is doing now and has done in the past. There's no provision in the Municipal Act dictating.
Oh no, I know that. It's just it's a guideline.
No, there's no such guideline. Not in the Municipal Act, there's no guideline. Municipal Act is a statute. It's you shall. You shall or you may. There's no such provision.
400-page manual.
We don't go by manuals. We go by the Municipal Act. That's the governing statute.
Okay. And then this evening is perhaps a case in point. It's been our observation, and it's my opinion, that those things that have been helpful or useful or informative arising from question period, in almost every case, they would have been better dealt with as a delegation, including your question tonight, Stuart.
I don't get it.
We've never denied you as a delegation. Here again, if we were to strictly abide by question period, what's the question, you would have got shut down 11 and a half minutes ago. Your opinion, your reasoning, your thoughts, helpful, useful, once again, would have been better as a delegation than question period. That's the general consensus. And as Mike has pointed out, we will continue to deal with and respond to all correspondence, all letters written to council. And if question period remains on the agenda, it would be to address those pieces of written correspondence, except where the person requires anonymity. Easy for me to say, but so thank you for your input, which would have made a better delegation than a question.
One quick thing to note. We were one of the very few municipalities that actually have an open question period every single council meeting. And I think when it was originally brought in, I was up there thinking with everybody else that this would be a fantastic idea and it's a good way to keep things transparent and this might be something that other municipalities may catch on to, but been through this process, seen the process for a long period of time, I think that there's a real reason why it has been the way that it is for several hundred years through all the different committees in different cities and townships. That question period, just no open floor, it slows down the process, and exactly as has been said here, a question that can be dealt with in 5 minutes and in private doesn't necessarily need to come out front. And when you have that space open for a delegation, for a good presentation that allows for open thought, now you prevent any back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and that's sort of exactly what has transpired here. So the delegation is the best way to handle any outstanding tough questions for the council.
I respectfully disagree with my colleague. If you sign up as a delegation, ladies and gentlemen, you are coming to council to give council information. Okay? That is it. You are providing us with information. The only questions that would be asked during a delegation presentation would be questions of clarification by council to the delegation to clarify the information that they are presenting. Again, question period can again happen. What we need to remember is that these council meetings are for the conducting of municipal business. The actual Q&A exchange would be far better suited in something like a town hall forum. And let's keep the council meetings as informative as possible. And that extends to written questions being submitted, giving us the chance to formulate an informed decision and present that information back to folks.
Thank you, Mike. I think pretty well everyone present and most of our viewers can think of examples where question period has been abused. Now, for us to clamp down on it, it puts a negative connotation on the whole issue. We'd rather put a positive spin on more productive alternatives.
Point of order, Mr. Reeve. Are there any other questions?
Does that mean you're done with this question?
If there are no other questions, I would suggest that we move on from question period.
Any other questions? Good, thank you very much. And here's what Mike's been desperately waiting for. A resolution that we adjourn this evening's meeting, the next council meeting to be held January 7th, 2020 in Winnipeg at 6:30 p.m. on Portage Avenue. Movers, seconders, please. Moved by Steve, seconded by Mike. Without further ado, all those in favor? Carried.
And my compliments to the stand-in chair. You handle the things very well.
Thank you for that. What is it they call it? Damned by fate praise?
Merry Christmas, everybody.
This is our last meeting before Christmas, so the best holiday greetings, Christmas, Hanukkah, the best greetings to from each of us to all of you. Thank you very much and good night.